Welcome to Compromising Positions. I'm Leanne Potter, cyber anthropologist and head of security operations for a major retailer.
And I'm Jeff Watkins, a cybersecurity enthusiast and CTO from a major tech consultancy. Together, we're the tech podcast that asks non-cybersecurity professionals what we in the industry can do to make their lives easier.
And help make our organisations more prepared to face ever-changing human-centric cyber threats. In this episode, we're joined by Helena Hill, a seasoned UX strategist and consultant and an AI expert with a wealth of experience spanning diverse clients from pre-startups to global industry giants.
Last week, Helena taught us how we in the cybersecurity team can effectively use the user experience team and its principles to improve our security controls and create a better journey. If you've not listened to that episode yet, please do check it out.
And in this episode, we're asking Helena about her other expertise in AI and how the cybersecurity teams can use tools like ChatGPT to make our lives easier.
Of course, we'll touch upon the cybersecurity concerns around AI, but mostly this will be a practical episode on how we can get the most out of these exciting tools.
This episode concludes season 1, so stick around for the end of the episode so you can hear about our exciting announcement for next year.
I'm so excited about next year. But now, we love this chat and we think you will do too. So sit back and enjoy our interview with Helena Hill for this episode, how to use ChatGPT and AI to level up your security function.
Well, let's change gears a little bit now. So you're a ChatGPT specialist. Well, what does that mean? But also, what do you use ChatGPT for?
Right, okay. So a little bit about the background of how this kind of came about, because say, well, why UX and why ChatGPT? Well, it actually came to me, I suppose I was a bit late to the party, I'm going to be honest. I probably should have done what I did months and months ago. And it wasn't something that I started looking at more seriously until about summertime, sort of May, June time. And what I was particularly interested in is how we can use large language models such as ChatGPT, or Bard or Llama 2, whatever it is that is your thing, to enhance customer experiences. So I guess how I was brought into it is, well, how can we use it to create content which would enable us to answer customer queries quicker or better? And of course, what we tend to think about is chatbots and how chatbots can be used to answer and personalize, very importantly, because personalization is a huge part of user experience, but how could we personalize customer queries or the answers to customer queries? So that's what got me sort of starting thinking about ChatGPT or other large language models and their role in customer experience. And I've recently conducted a number of workshops, and I'm off actually to Leeds and Cheshire on the 4th and 5th of December to deliver 4 workshops down there, as I think it's part of Leeds Digital Festival, or at least it's on their website anyway. And one of the things I talk about is how to create a chatbot. And the case study I give is that of Octopus Energy, who have employed chatbots within their customer service. Now, we have to talk a little bit about the ethics of ChatGPT and AI, I think a little bit, and the ethics in this context is jobs. What does it mean for jobs? Because one chatbot has replaced pretty much 250 people, which is not a good thing. Interestingly, however, the chatbot and the way it has conversed with customers and answered their queries successfully, they have been given a much better customer satisfaction score than humans have. So there are some great things about it in terms of creating organizational efficiencies and reducing costs. Of course, the bad side is that it is also replacing jobs. So I think there's a couple of things to think about there. So I kind of fell into it, to go back to what you were asking, in that way, is what the role of large language models were in terms of creating exceptional customer experiences. I then signed up to the Blockchain Council and I completed their ChatGPT expert course. And since then, it's all gone a little bit mad, I have to admit.
I've definitely noticed. I think we reached out to you just before you were about to complete it. And then you completed it. Then all of a sudden, you were in my feed for ChatGPT and AI constantly.
Yeah. It's gone a little bit crazy. And then I have to admit, it's taken me a bit by surprise. But I guess the more I learn about it and AI in general and its role in organizational design and customer experience, it's not surprising really in a way that it has become so much part of what I do. So again, at the moment, I've recently launched the consulting part of that, the ChatGPT consulting. And it certainly, again, like the UX, what interests me most is how can we actually embed AI into a product development process, or where's the low hanging fruit? What can we try first, rather than trying to sort of replace everything with AI today, because it's impossible and it will fail. So it goes hand in hand with UX, I think, or some aspects of it certainly. But
certainly Gen AI does.
Yes,
yeah.
generative AI, definitely. I think there's some things that we have to be aware of, because I know we realize we're talking about security today. I think there's a couple of things we have to think about that. I think we have to think about how generative AI is used to replicate websites or experiences for malicious reasons. And I don't know how much of that you are expecting to see in that.
Well, there's things like fraud GPT as well. So there's a lot of things in place with the big players that will prevent you from being able to do malicious things. So if you go onto ChatGPT and say, write me a phishing email, it'll be like, I can't do that.
Yes.
But that's only if you go with the big players.
Mm-hmm.
If you go through to other places like Fraud GPT, and I can't remember what the other ones are called. I'll put it in the show notes, but don't go on them, listeners. But they exist. You can actually pay and have like this large language model, and it will do all the malicious stuff you want. It'll say, you can say things like, write me some malware to deploy here, and things like that.
That's frightening stuff, isn't it?
There's the scary things around automation of things like WhatsApp messaging for the Hey Mom scam. The one where they ask you, I've got a new number, I need some money. And currently a lot of that is human, but it's now getting to the point where these are convincing enough. But the other thing as well is the amount of bot traffic AI is creating, along with other automation, is they reckon the tipping point will be in the next couple of years where there's actually more bot traffic on the internet than human traffic.
I think so.
And then we get to the point where there's more bot generated content than human content. And you get to the point where it's effectively, they're calling it then, it's the zombie internet, because it's not really being driven by us. It's not really alive anymore. Well, that's a worry.
I think that is a worry. I mean, large language model. I mean, let's take ChatGPT, for example. Last I looked, it was trained on the internet, books, white papers, whatever it might be, text in general, up until January 22. But the more, like you mentioned, Jeff, there, you're quite right. I think the more bot-generated content is then put out into that same domain, the bot is training on its own content, as it were, and like you say, less and less of human generated content and more bot content. And that, I think, is something that we all need to be aware of. I was asked a question in one of the workshops actually recently about social platforms, and when, as users, they might start penalizing bot created content. I think that's already starting to happen, actually, and I think we're going to see more than that. And I think it's keeping an eye on how they are going to monitor it and how they're going to penalize it and how much. I mean, there are already tools out there such as undetectable.ai, for example, Originality, Winston, that will detect AI created content. The crazy thing is that they can detect that AI created content and then humanize it for you. So you wonder what, we're kind of going full circle in these things. Yeah, I think there's a few other bits. I think we have to be careful of hallucinations in large language models. I think we need to ensure that we double check every source that is presented to us. I mean, it's very, very honest, and in the user interface, does say, it's when I'm not always right. Please do check everything. But I the number of people who actually do that, I think, is probably very small. And we do have to be careful of biased information as well with any large language model.
Yeah, I've been using the Bing AI image generator. I've got a Midjourney subscription, but the Bing it's DALL-E. It's very good at generating text now, whereas text was just garbage before. Yeah. And I said, write me a 4-panel cartoon about people explaining, I think it was large language models, and it started taking LLMs. It just went, the next 2 speech bubbles were male, and then they said something else, and like, oh, it does actually put bias into its messages as well, into its images. I guess it's just becoming a hyper focused version of what the real world's like when we're trying to shift that, which is interesting but also a challenge.
It's only a reflection of what we put on there,
exactly,
isn't it? Really, and the internet, a lot of it is quite abhorrent. so of course it's only going to be reflected back as that.
I think there's a couple of other things that we need to think about though in terms of using, let's use ChatGPT for example. From a user point of view, I have opted to share my data with the model. You can opt out of sharing your data with the model, but I think only after 30 days, but put me right if that's not quite right. I think that's the case. But the other things I think that we need to be aware of is ChatGPT 4, where we have the ability to be able to use plugins. ChatGPT-4. So, for example, PDF readers, diagram makers. We have plugins such as Wolfram, high sort of that can give you sort of much more in-depth finance and numeric data. Something to be aware of is that those plugins may not have the same security that ChatGPT-4, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, is that these plugins are developed by third parties and they may not have the security measures that OpenAI does in place. So I think that's something to be very aware of. And I think the same with chatbots too, is who's holding that data and what's been done with that data after you have engaged with that chatbot. So there's a couple, I think, security things there to aware of.
I think if you're implementing it, when you're thinking about the user experience, is giving people some of that, again, back to the trust in the platform. This is a chatbot. You got to, I think, from an ethical point of view, you've got to tell them this is a chatbot. It may not be right, and that also this is what we're going to do with your data, and it might be used for improving the service. It'll be nothing PII captured. We'll strip that out. Those kind of things to put trust in, because people are naturally, there's like 50% of people who's like, cool, I'm going to use this, and they just don't care. They'll paste their national insurance number.
How often do we see that, Jeff? We very rarely see that. A chatbot appears in the bottom right hand side with no warning whatsoever, and certainly no information on what will be done with that data once you've signed out or you've finished your conversation with that bot, or even if it's a human. I don't know if I've ever seen that. Maybe once or twice.
I think there's one place in the world where you have to declare that this is a chatbot, not a human, and I think that's California.
Right.
That's the only place in the world where you have to declare that.
I wonder if we might see that coming. I think we might see that becoming more widespread.
Especially with GDPR, the wording around it, I think they're even tightening this up about basically if this is a machine-driven decision, you have a right to know, and you also have a right to know how that decision was made, which is a massive problem with very complex systems, because sometimes they can't really explain.
I think it's a really interesting separate conversational project you had there about chatbots and the experience of using a chatbot and the level of security.
But also chatbots can be used for good.
Yes.
So if I'm thinking internally in an organization, many times we've said already in this conversation, really under-resourced function, the security team. So if you had a chatbot and someone said within your own environment for your staff only, and they had cybersecurity questions, and you had a list of parameters that you were happy for that bot to answer, that could really save time. And okay, right, you've clicked on this. Okay, let me put you in touch with the right team, or let me take some details from you, and then send that over to the instant response team, and then you don't have to deal with it. So
and of course you can train that model on your content, can't you? So it can be it can maybe come up with information an awful lot quicker than it might be if you had to wait for somebody else to get back to you. So without you having to then go through searches and all the rest of it. So no, I agree. I think there's a very positive use for chatbots. And I think in terms of, my UX and customer experience head on, I know certainly in terms of Octopus Energy, it's been extremely successful.
That's one of the other examples I've used in presentations recently for looking at things like CRM and customer management. The other thing is that harnessing ChatGPT is actually the prompt engineering element. And do you have any tips on, when you've done your studies on it, like what we should be doing with prompt engineering to get the most out of the tool?
Recently did some training on prompt engineering, or prompt designing, maybe I should call it, as a UXer. But there's, I think, how you ask ChatGPT or other large language models, there are others available out there, how you ask them for a piece of information or whatever it might be, or a question or a comparison it might be, for example, how you do that will really quite greatly affect the answer or the information that you get out of it. So asking a simple question, for example, yes, you might get an answer that is sufficient and does what you need it to do. But I found there are a number of, if you include a number of aspects to a prompt, you can often get a much better response from it. So, for example, giving ChatGPT a role. So you are an expert in cybersecurity, for example, or you are an experienced UX consultant. Giving it a role, I find it can be quite interesting, and you can certainly get a better response. But if you also include the task, so you are an expert in cybersecurity, write me an outline for a 10-slide presentation on two-factor authentication, for example. So you've got your role, you've got your task. You can give it some context, and you could give it also, what's really important, and again, this is definitely user experience head on, tell it who the audience is going to be. So I used an example of writing about the significance of the moon landing. So give me a couple of sentences about the significance of the moon landings. Yeah, you'll get 2 sentences. It will do what you've asked it to do. But if you say you are an expert in moon landings, I'd like you to write 2 sentences or a paragraph, let's say, about the significance of the moon landings. I would like you to lay it out in the following way. I'd like it to have an introduction, main content, and a conclusion, and then give it an exemplar, just like a 3-course meal. So you've got a task, you've got some context, you've got an exemplar, and then the audience is a group of 6-year-olds who have just completed a set of lessons on the moon landings. Now, it's going to give you something very different, or a very different output if you ask for that, with everything else being the same other than that last sentence. The audience are a small group of seniors who have come along on a Thursday morning to hear from an expert about the significance of the moon landings. You get 2 very, very different results. So ensuring that you give it a role, giving it a task, give it an exemplar, give it some context, and give it an audience type is how I find you get the best or much better out of ChatGPT than you would by just asking it a very simple question, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
And I think that would just be a fantastic way to really enhance security awareness messages in particular. Again, going back to that thing is, a lot of cybersecurity people never worked in marketing and design. They do talk very techy. They might not have a cyber anthropologist like myself in-house to be able to discuss why culture is important and things like that.
I imagine many places
Yeah, it's an interesting, lonely Google. Using things, this is why we wanted to ask these questions about ChatGPT, because yes, there's some scary aspects to it, and I'm sure that a lot of cybersecurity people are really trying to get to grips with, like, what can we allow people to do? How can we allow people to use this safely? What limits our risk exposure to using this tool? There's no point stopping this tool, in my opinion, because people will go around it and, go to their own devices and do the same thing anyway. So how do you put safe guardrails? But also, don't forget, you can use it too, cybersecurity people. You could really utilize this tool and give you skills that you maybe can't afford to get in-house, or maybe would find difficult to source and get buy-in, and really understand how do you create more meaningful cybersecurity messages based on your audience.
Yeah.
You could literally say, I work in a large retail organization. I need to write a cybersecurity campaign for the people who work in the offices. I need to write a cybersecurity campaign to raise awareness for people who work on the shop floor. All these different audiences you could cater for, and you could have, in very short space of time, when in a very time poor function, a whole campaign, really, in the space of a few hours.
Yeah. And this comes down, you asked me some time ago now, about, what do I use ChatGPT for? And that is exactly one of the ways in which I use it. I use it to create efficiencies. Now, I'm not the type of person who is going to ask ChatGPT to write me something and then just go publish it on the web. Not a chance. And I do not condone doing that at all. But, even if you took 80% of it and then inject that 20% of you, because let's face it, the people who hire me because I'm me, not because I'm a robot. ChatGPT doesn't have the experience that I do. It doesn't have the nuances. It doesn't understand, the culture inside organizations that you take all that time to understand. And so I think for me, it's been such a time saver. And that's really important to somebody who is extremely time poor. Just having that, can you give me the outline of, or could you suggest the outline of this? Oh, right. Okay. Because I often struggle with just that. What's my starter for 10 here? What is it that I'm going to start with? Just the outline. If I had the outline in my head, I could do this. Now, sometimes that outline's not perfect. That's fine. I can play around with it, but at least I've got something to work with. And that's been an absolute godsend for me. It really has.
It's an absolute game changer for that sinking feeling, back in my university days would call the white page feeling. and just thinking, I've got a task to complete, I don't know where to start. And I think these tools really can help. And you touched upon earlier about people losing their jobs, which is a huge worry. But there's also another positive side where people are saying, actually, if we plan this right, and it has to be something us as workers get together and really plan. It shouldn't be, these tools, time-saving elements of these tools shouldn't be so that people can make us work harder.
No.
Like, oh, you're saving time, therefore work more. It should be, actually, you're saving time. Maybe we can go to a 4-day week.
That would be positive.
Maybe we should.
It?
Change actually the culture around work instead.
Yeah,
that's kind of my hope.
Yeah, that would be a positive outcome. Definitely.
Luxury, fully automated space communism.
Well, I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this chat. I'm sure our listeners have too. It's something that's very top of mind as well. Not just the ChatGPT stuff, but also we want to do a good job for our users. We know that it's painful. You know, we experience it too because we have to go through those journeys ourselves. But if we just had a little bit more understanding of where the boundaries were so we can make these things better, I think that would really benefit everyone in the long term.
It would. And like I said, and I've said several times during this podcast, it's all down to the user. It's all down to that research. Go out there, ask the questions, test again. It'll never be perfect, but at least it'll be validated.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
If people want to reach out and find you, I'm sure they definitely will. Like, please come in and help us with our, maybe even our security program. How would they go about getting in contact with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Helena Hill on LinkedIn. You can also find me at my website, which is helenahill.com. Those are probably the two easiest ways. And I have a very easy email address too. That is helena@helenahill.com.
Perfect. I will put all that information in the show notes, but thank you so much for being a wonderful guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. For this episode, we're really keen to not just focus on the dark side of AI or the cybersecurity risks. We've both been experimenting with how to create better security tools through generative AI and prompt engineering, and how you leverage this technology is really only limited by your own imagination.
And how good your prompts are.
And that was the other aim for this episode, how to start using these tools more effectively.
Indeed, so much so that you've segued, lovely, by the way, into our special announcement.
Yeah, today's episode is episode 12 of Compromising Positions and the end of season 1. Firstly, a huge thank you to everyone who supported this journey through things like listening, sharing, subscribing, leaving a review, or providing us feedback. Can't thank you enough for lending your ears and your thoughts on this rather unusual approach to talking about cybersecurity by only speaking to non-cybersecurity professionals.
And of course, a huge thank you to all our kind guests who have been so generous with their time and expertise. But this is not the end of Compromising Positions. We have enough episodes already recorded to last us well into summer next year, and we fully intend to bring you fantastic guests and new insights for all of 2024.
We're going to take a few weeks off in January, but you won't have to go cold turkey. We'll be releasing an AI special mini-series, shorts for our 12 Days of Breachmas, and trailers for season 2.
I can't wait.
Me too. Links to everything Helena discussed in this episode can be found in the show notes. And if you like the show, please do leave us a review and share on LinkedIn or in your teams. It really helps us spread the word and get high quality guests like Helena on future episodes.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and this season. See you next time. Keep secure and don't forget to ask yourself, am I the compromising position here?